I wore his favorite lingerie for another man. He burned it and walked out, leaving me alone. Just like how partners aren't meant to be shared, I guess sharing what's special to them, no matter what it is, also feels like betrayal. I thought I had made the smartest, cleanest move ever, only to end up broken and empty. Who says there's a time to cheat and a time to be faithful in a relationship? If such a time existed, I'd be crossing the finish line with James right now. Nothing feels right anymore, and I guess there's no need to dwell on what's already happened. All I have to do is clean up the mess and start making things right again. But how? How do you rebuild a relationship alone when the other person isn't willing to give you another chance? I don't even know where to begin, and that's why I'm here, to seek any kind of help or advice, anything that could help me bring James back into my life. I don't care what it takes. I'll do it as long as I can have him back. James has been a part of my life for almost 4 years now, and living these past few weeks without him feels like I'm slowly falling apart. He was the sweetest person I've ever known, down to earth, finding joy in even the smallest things. Our relationship was something I never imagined would end, not even in my wildest dreams. Everything about us felt right, full of life, love, and color. We were even ready to take the next step, marriage, but I ruined it. My choices and actions that day proved me wrong, confirming that life never goes as planned. We have control over every decision we make, but when it comes to the outcome, we're completely powerless, left at the mercy of fate. That's where I am right now. I'm Sarah, an influencer. I'm obsessed with social media. And aside from the moments I share with James and a few friends, my life revolves around work and online platforms. I spent most of my days and nights taking selfies, jumping on trends, exercising, shopping, and doing other activities. The joy I felt every time my post blew up with reactions, comments, and views was enough to make my day. But now, with everything that's happened, it doesn't feel the same anymore. James's absence has left me facing a painful reality. All that I thought was real now feels fake. The same people who once praised me, called me beautiful, and called themselves my fans are now hurling hateful comments, insults, and curses at me. How did things get to this point? Where's the courage I once had? The day I betrayed the most precious person in my life, I desperately need that same courage to win him back. Everything went downhill the day my agency got an endorsement deal, and the best influencer was to be selected for the job. I was confident, believing no one else was more qualified than me. Just as I expected, I was chosen. I was thrilled, feeling like I was still on top of my game. But then, the assistant CEO suggested that my competitor, Sally, should also be considered. We were both put in a competition, tasked with proving ourselves, and the winner would get the endorsement. I felt wronged and betrayed. It was like offering me candy and snatching it back before I could taste it. I was furious, but determined to prove that I was more than deserving of the job. That moment planted a seed in me, one that has now grown into something I can neither nurture nor be proud of. After the announcement, I came home furious. While having dinner with James, I told him about the opportunity and how I had to compete to earn the endorsement. James encouraged me, telling me to keep doing what I'm good at and to believe in myself. He said no matter what, I would always be the best in his eyes, and that I didn't need to prove myself to anyone. His words refilled my confidence, and I went back to work the next day feeling better. But slowly, things began to change. I became too obsessed with my work, drifting away from James. Our wedding was in a month, and all I could think about was work. I was too busy to help with the preparations, leaving everything to James and our families. James tried his best to handle it all, understanding how much my work meant to me. James's mother wasn't a fan of my profession. She thought my job was too time-consuming and sat me down to talk about it. She suggested that while work is important, family and love should also be prioritized. I didn't care that her advice came from a good place. I was impatient, unreasonable, and upset. My fans meant the world to me. They were my family. I loved them, and I couldn't turn my back on the attention they gave me. It made me feel special, and that feeling was something I couldn't let go of. Because of this, I disliked James's mother. James tried to help me understand her, saying she was only concerned about me, but I didn't see it that way. To me, she wanted me to give up what I loved most. How could staying home, doing chores, having kids, and looking after a husband mean she was looking out for me? I convinced myself that James's mother hated me, just like those mothers-in-law who prioritize their sons over everything else. I was happy as long as James supported me, believing I would always have the upper hand. But then, James regretted supporting my career for the first time. It happened the day I prioritized work over his mom. I ignored her calls on purpose because she wasn't my favorite person. I didn't know she was sick and needed help getting to the hospital for a checkup. James was on a business trip, so she reached out to me instead. I ignored her calls, telling myself I didn't need to see her for our relationship to work. As long as I loved her son and showed up on the wedding day, that was enough. Everything seemed fine until James called me later, furious. His mom had been rushed to the hospital by her neighbors, and they had been trying to reach me all day. He sounded so angry that instead of feeling guilty, I got upset too. I hung up on him and finished my work before heading to the hospital. When I arrived, I hurried to his mom's room, only to find her on a video call with her friends, laughing and bragging about her son's upcoming wedding. My anger deepened, especially after how James had scolded me. When she saw me, she called me over, introducing me to her friends as her son's wife. When they asked about my job, she didn't let me speak, immediately saying I worked on the internet. She bragged about my popularity and how much money I made. If I were reasonable, I would have understood that James's mom was proud of me and my accomplishments, but wanted me to make more time for family. But I wasn't reasonable. Instead, I saw her as a hypocrite, someone who wanted to show me off but didn't want me to enjoy my success. What I did for a living became a major issue. James arrived later, and after we took his mom home, we returned to our place. That's when we got into a huge argument. James asked what I was doing when his mother called, and I casually replied that I was working. James almost lost his temper. He asked what kind of person would prioritize work over family, and I told him that a rational and logical person would. He was furious and said that if it were my mom or even my cousins calling him while he was working, he'd drop everything to answer. I didn't doubt that he valued my family, but I wasn't in the mood to listen. I was about to walk away when he asked me to quit my job or cut back on my hours, so we wouldn't regret it someday. I overreacted, shouted at him, and said many harsh things. Maybe that was my chance to reflect, but I let my pride get in the way. I asked him why he wasn't quitting his job or reducing his workload. He explained that his job wasn't a problem because he always made time for me and his family. He made it clear that whenever anyone called, he answered, and whenever I needed him, he was there. He didn't let work interfere with his relationships, but I did. I refused to listen to reason, and instead told him that my job was a part of me. I accused him of being a hater who wanted to hold me back. I was determined to get the endorsement and become more successful than he could ever imagine. That's when my obsession began. I was willing to do anything to secure the contract. The next day, I came home from work, and James had taken time out of his busy schedule to prepare dinner for me. I was touched, but I pretended to still be upset and went upstairs to the bedroom. I changed into his favorite lingerie, the one he had gifted me on our first anniversary. Every time I wore it, James's eyes were filled with desire, and he'd do anything I asked. It was like his weakness. I came downstairs and found him sitting at the dining table, looking upset. I sneaked up behind him, hugged him, and kissed his cheeks. He stood up, pulled me into a hug, and we kissed. I can still remember the look in his eyes that night. It was a complete opposite of the man I saw the day I messed up. We made up that evening, and things went back to normal, but it didn't last long. Another misunderstanding arose when I was supposed to go shopping with my mom and his mom, who got along wonderfully. On my way to meet them, I got a call from work. The person in charge of the endorsement wanted to speak to me. The excitement took over, and I completely forgot about my appointment, leaving them stranded at the mall. They went ahead and bought what they needed, but they didn't have a car. I was supposed to drive them. My phone was on silent, and I missed all their calls. They had to find their way home. Meanwhile, I met up with a client, Jonas, who turned out to be my biggest fan. He had been following me since day one, commenting on all my posts and even remembering things I had forgotten. I was thrilled, thinking everything was sealed. But as we discussed the contract, he told me he'd only give me the deal if I agreed to spend time with him. I was furious and lashed out, saying I was engaged and would never cheat on James. I should have stood my ground, but my confidence wavered when he told me Sally had already agreed to his terms. He painted a picture of how much fame and success Sally would gain, leaving me in the shadows. Hearing that shattered my self-confidence, and for the first time, I saw myself as a failure. Instead of walking away, I told him I needed time to think, a decision I now deeply regret. When I got home, James was waiting for me. He didn't even let me speak and started questioning me about where I had been. Both our mothers had called him, complaining that I hadn't shown up. He had been worried sick, especially since he couldn't reach me all day. I could tell he was concerned, but I was too sensitive and took his words the wrong way. I felt like he and his mother were holding me back from achieving my dreams. I accused him of not valuing my job and even asked if I was his fiancé or a caregiver for his family. I told him if they couldn't manage without me, they should all get out of my life. James was furious, and we had another heated argument. He didn't speak to me the rest of the night. The next morning, before he left for work, I knew he was still upset. Instead of trying to fix things, I pushed it all aside and went to work. When I got to my agency, I overheard colleagues gossiping about me and Sally. What made me angrier was hearing that the client was already considering Sally as the best choice. Everywhere I turned, I felt like people were talking about me. When Sally arrived, she acted proud and confident, and everyone flocked around her like she was some kind of star. I couldn't handle it and made a reckless decision. I texted Jonas, agreeing to his terms on condition that he'd give me evidence to bring Sally down. I thought if I was going to climb the ladder, I might as well eliminate any threats. Jonas agreed, and we met up that evening. We had a few drinks, and before I knew it, I had made the biggest mistake of my life. I told myself it would only happen once, and after that, I'd marry James and start over. But Jonas had other plans. He secretly recorded our moments and sent me the clips, blackmailing me. He promised to give me the deal, but said he couldn't resist seeing me again. I was trapped. No matter how much I begged, he didn't care and threatened to expose me. What was supposed to happen once turned into twice, then 3 times, and more. I couldn't tell James, or anyone. I was stuck. Jonas kept his promise and sent me clips of Sally, but he also demanded more from me. He had gone through my social media and seen a post about the lingerie James had gifted me. He wanted me to wear it for him on the eve of my wedding day. He wanted to feel like James, and I had no choice but to agree. I had fallen into a trap with no way out. He promised that this would be the end of everything. He said he would delete all the evidence he had about me, and we could put it all behind us. I was such a fool to believe his lies. On the eve of my wedding, I lied to James, telling him my colleagues were throwing a party to celebrate my upcoming wedding and that I'd be home late. He trusted me and didn't ask too many questions. He dropped me off at work that evening and mentioned he'd spend time with his friends. He told me to call him if I needed a ride home. I assured him I'd be fine and that I'd meet him at home so we could leave for the hotel together the next day. After James dropped me off, I waited until he was gone and then hailed a taxi to Jonas's hotel. I had packed James's favorite lingerie and changed into it, waiting for Jonas. When he arrived, I did everything I could to please him, even more than I ever had for James. I lowered myself to the point of humiliation, doing whatever he asked, just so this nightmare would end. It was the most degrading experience of my life, but I told myself it would be the last time. After this, I believed my life would return to normal. But how can you erase a sin so easily? Jonas deleted everything he had on me. I made sure of that before leaving. When I got home, James wasn't there. I should have suspected something was wrong, but I naively thought he was still out with his friends. The next morning, James was still missing. I couldn't reach him on his phone, social media, or anywhere. He had vanished. Worried, I went to the hotel as planned. I felt a wave of relief when I saw all the guests and family members present, ready for the big day. I joined in, getting myself ready for what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Hours passed, and the guests were all there, but my groom was missing. By noon, people started to leave. Eventually, I took off my wedding gown and changed into regular clothes. I was heartbroken, embarrassed, and couldn't face anyone. The media was buzzing about me, and everyone who knew me had something to say. My family and James's family were furious and worried, as no one could reach him. I went back to our house to check for him, only to find James in the living room, eating popcorn and watching a TV series. I almost lost my mind. Everyone was out there worried sick about him. And here he was, laughing and enjoying himself as if nothing had happened. His eyes were swollen. I couldn't tell if it was from crying or laughing too hard. Overcome with rage, I stormed into the living room, smashed the television, and exploded at him. I screamed, calling him names and accusing him of humiliating me and my family. I cried, asking if our wedding day meant nothing to him, and why he had even come into my life if he didn't want to marry me. James threw his popcorn at me, jumped to his feet, and cursed at me with equal fury. He said he regretted wasting 4 years of his life on someone like me and couldn't believe he had almost married me. I was stunned and terrified. He ran upstairs and returned with the lingerie in his hands. He revealed that someone had sent him a live video of me in the lingerie, acting in ways he never thought I could. He said he felt humiliated, especially after seeing the disappointed reactions from his friends who had also seen the video. He called me his biggest mistake and said I was an embarrassment to him and his family. He told me he could never marry someone like me. No matter how many times he asked me why I had done it, I couldn't answer. I stood there frozen, crying uncontrollably. James was beyond reason, shouting and throwing a tantrum. He took the lingerie, threw it into a steel bin, and set it on fire with a lighter. He glared at me and said, "Just like I'm burning this lingerie, I'm burning you out of my life forever." He ordered me to leave his house and never come back. He told me he had already packed my things and sent them to my family's home. I felt my breath leave me and I passed out. When I woke up, I was at my parents' house. My mom told me James had left me outside and called him to pick me up. I couldn't believe it. James had completely erased me from his life. All I could do was cry, overwhelmed with regret. Why do we even have the word secrets when nothing stays hidden forever? I had lost James, and now my career, the thing I had been so obsessed with, was gone too. I couldn't accept that after all the terrible things I had done, everything had come to nothing. I had lost everything. My life, my love, my work, my whole world. After my breakup with James, I decided to give us both time to heal. The day the board announced who would get the endorsement, I was sure it would be me. But to my shock, Jonas had given the deal to Sally. I was furious and devastated. I confronted Jonas, and he coldly told me he could never choose me, especially with the controversy surrounding my breakup with James. He said it wasn't his fault. It was Sally. She had offered him the best deal and had even suggested the plan to set me up. She was the one who sent the live video to James. Jonas didn't care what happened to me. I confronted Sally, but she showed no remorse. She boasted about being above me now and said I had no right to speak to her. She called me a loser. I couldn't take it anymore. I released a video Jonas had given me of her, and it went viral, ruining both her and Jonas's reputations. I made sure we all went down together. I couldn't bear to suffer alone. I regret everything. I wish I had let go of my thirst for fame and recognition when James and his mom had warned me. I've tried begging James for weeks, but he has completely cut me off. I have nowhere to go and nothing left. I deleted my social media accounts, quit my job, and moved to a new environment, hoping to start over. But no matter how hard I try, I can't escape the hell I created for myself.